After my heart surgery, my son-in-law said, "That old woman just drains our money. She should already be in a nursing home." My daughter laughed. The next day, he couldn't use his card. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The steady beep of the heart monitor had been my constant companion for 3 days. The bypass surgery had gone well, according to Dr. Matthews, but recovery would be slow at my age. When Milani suggested I stay with them instead of hiring a home nurse, I was touched. My daughter rarely invited me to her grand house in the suburbs, a house I had helped them buy, though they never mentioned that part. "It'll be easier for everyone," she had said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Clark agrees. We have the guest room downstairs, so you won't have to deal with stairs." That first night in their home, I was too exhausted and medicated to notice the tension. The guest room was pristine but impersonal, not a single family photo or memento. Just beige walls, beige carpet, and a hospital bed they'd rented for my recovery. Still, I was grateful. At 68, I didn't bounce back like I used to. It was on the 3rd day that everything changed. I had been dozing on and off, the pain medication making me drift between sleep and wakefulness. The door to my room was slightly ajar, Milani's idea so she could hear if I needed anything. In reality, she checked on me just twice a day, morning and evening, usually while talking on her phone. That afternoon, I heard their voices in the hallway. They must have thought I was asleep. "How long is she staying again?" Clark's voice, tight with irritation. "The doctor said at least 3 weeks," Milani replied. "Maybe 4. A heavy sigh from Clark. "That's a month of babysitting an invalid. Do you know how much this is costing us? The special foods, the medications, the utilities?" I felt my chest tighten, and it had nothing to do with my recent surgery. "No, I know." Milani's voice dropped lower. "But what choice do we have? She's my mother." "This old woman just drains our money," Clark said, his voice cold and deliberate. "She should be in a nursing home by now. We could sell that house of hers and be done with it." There was a pause, the kind that stretches like an eternity. I waited for my daughter to defend me, to remind him that the house of hers had been partially paid for with my retirement savings, to remind him that I had worked 2 jobs for decades to give Milani everything I never had. Instead, I heard her laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh, not a dismissive one, a genuine laugh of agreement. "God, you're terrible," she said, but her tone was affectionate. "But you're not wrong. The Sunset Valley home has openings. Maybe after she recovers, we can suggest it? Say it's for her own good? The sooner the better," Clark replied. "Every day she's here is another day we're hemorrhaging money." Their voices faded as they moved toward the kitchen. I lay there, a fresh kind of pain spreading through my chest, one that no surgery could fix. My own daughter, my only child, the girl I had raised alone after her father left us when she was just 3, the child I had sacrificed everything for. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the conversation replaying in my mind like a horror movie I couldn't turn off. When Milani brought my evening medication, I swallowed it dutifully and thanked her with a smile that felt like broken glass on my lips. "You look pale, Mom," she said, glancing at her watch. "Should I call the doctor?" "No, dear," I replied. "Just tired." "Recovery takes time at my age," she nodded, already turning toward the door. "Clark and I have that charity gala tomorrow night. Mrs. Peterson from next door will check on you. I've left her number on the nightstand." After she left, I pulled myself up with effort and reached for my purse. My hands trembled as I took out my phone, not from weakness, but from a cold, clear rage I had never felt before. I called my bank, then my investment manager, then my lawyer. By morning, I had a plan. Not a word would be said about what I'd heard. Not a single tear would be shed in front of them. They wanted my money? They thought I was just a burden, an ATM for their lavish lifestyle? It was time they learned who had really been draining whom. The next evening, I watched from my window as Milani and Clark left for their gala, dressed in designer clothes bought with my loans that were never repaid. Clark helped Milani into their luxury SUV, another gift from me for their 5th anniversary. They drove away without looking back, not knowing that everything had already changed. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Milani, her voice shrill, with panic. "Mom, something's wrong with our accounts." Clark's card was declined at the gala dinner. It was humiliating. And when he checked our accounts, everything's frozen. Even my credit cards aren't working. I took a deep, steady breath. "How strange," I said, my voice calm. "You should call the bank in the morning." But we both knew what had happened. I had taken back control of my life, one frozen account at a time. The elderly burden had just shown her teeth. I didn't sleep that night after freezing their accounts. My heart, the one that had just been surgically repaired, felt heavy with a mixture of vindication and grief. As I lay in that impersonal guest room, memories washed over me like waves, each one carrying the weight of decades of sacrifice. It was 1983 when Robert left us. Milani was just 3 years old, a tiny thing with pigtails and a smile that could melt granite. I was 31, suddenly alone with a mortgage, a toddler, and a part-time bookkeeping job that barely covered groceries. "I can't do this family thing anymore, Harriet," Robert had said, packing his suitcase while Milani napped in the next room. "I'm suffocating here." I begged him to stay, not out of love, that had faded years before, but for our daughter's sake. He left anyway, moving to California with his 24-year-old secretary. The child support checks came sporadically for 6 months, then stopped altogether. That first year alone was the hardest. I took a second job waiting tables at night, after putting Milani to bed, leaving her with my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gladwell. Then I added weekend shifts at the local department store. 3 jobs, barely enough sleep to function, but Milani never went without. She had new shoes when she needed them, pretty dresses for school pictures, dance lessons because she loved to twirl. I still remember her 5th birthday party. I'd worked double shifts for weeks to afford the Barbie dream house she wanted. When she unwrapped it, her eyes went wide with wonder. "How did you know, Mommy?" she gasped, her little hands touching the plastic mansion reverently. "Mommies always know," I told her, hiding my exhaustion behind a smile. I never told her how I'd skipped meals that month to save those extra dollars. She didn't need to know. Children shouldn't carry adult burdens. As Milani grew, so did her needs and her wants. In middle school, it was brand-name clothes so she wouldn't be teased. In high school, it was SAT prep courses and college application fees. I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to ensure she could attend Westlake University when she was accepted. The pride I felt at her graduation was worth every sacrifice, every missed hour of sleep, every gray hair that came prematurely. "You did it, baby," I whispered, hugging her in her cap and gown. "We did it, Mom," she corrected, and my heart soared. That was the last time I remembered her acknowledging my sacrifices. After college, Milani landed a job at a marketing firm. Not a great salary, but enough for her to get her own apartment. Yet whenever she needed something, a security deposit, a new professional wardrobe, a reliable car, she came to me. And I always gave, even when it meant dipping into my retirement. "Savings. It's just until I get on my feet," she would say. "I'll pay you back, Mom, I promise." She never did. Then came Clark. Handsome, ambitious Clark with his business degree and his plans to start his own investment firm. Milani was smitten from their first date. Within 6 months, they were engaged. I had my reservations. There was something calculating in his eyes when he looked at my daughter, something cold when he looked at me. But I kept them to myself. Milani was happy, and that's all that mattered. Their wedding was lavish. far beyond what they could afford, on their salaries. When Milani tearfully confessed they were $10,000 short for their dream venue, I wrote the check without hesitation. "You deserve the perfect day," I told her, though it meant postponing my retirement by another year. A year after the wedding, they found the house, a 4-bedroom colonial in an exclusive neighborhood. The down payment was steep, nearly 20% of the asking price. "Mom, we love this house," Milani said over dinner one night, Clark nodding beside her. "But the bank wants such a large down payment. We've been saving, but—" "How much do you need?" I asked, already knowing I would. "Give it, whatever the amount." The figure they named represented almost half of my remaining retirement fund. But the hope in Milani's eyes, the future I imagined for her, perhaps grandchildren playing in that big backyard, made the decision easy. "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I said. Clark reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're amazing, Harriet. We'll pay you back with interest." That was 7 years ago. Not a single dollar had been repaid. Instead, there were more requests for landscaping the new property, for furniture befitting such a home, for a boat because Clark needs to entertain clients. Each time I gave. Each time they promised to repay. Each time they didn't. When my own house needed a new roof 3 years ago, I couldn't afford it. I sold the place at below market value and moved into a small apartment. Milani and Clark suggested I invest the remaining money from the sale with Clark's firm. "I'll grow it for you, Harriet," he promised. "You'll have more than enough for a comfortable retirement." I trusted him. I trusted them. I handed over nearly everything I had. And now here I was, recovering from heart surgery in their guest room, listening to them plot to put me in a nursing home after bleeding me dry for decades. The next morning, after their cards were declined, they came home early from the gala. I heard them arguing in the kitchen, their voices rising despite their attempts to keep quiet. "What do you mean all the accounts are frozen?" Milani hissed. "Exactly what I said," Clark snapped back. "Everything with your mother's name on it. Frozen. And since that's where most of our operating capital comes from, did you call the bank?" "Of course I called the bank. They said it was done at the account holder's request, your mother's request." There was a long silence. "She knows," Milani finally said, her voice barely audible. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. For the first time in decades, I wasn't going to put Milani's feelings before my own. The daughter I raised would have to face the mother she betrayed. The bedroom door opened without a knock. Milani stood there, her gala dress rumpled, her mascara smudged from what I assumed were angry tears. Behind her loomed Clark, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Mom," Milani said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." "We need to talk," Milani repeated, taking a step into the room. Clark hovered behind her like a shadow. I sat up straighter in the hospital bed, ignoring the twinge in my chest. "Yes, I believe we do." "Why did you freeze our accounts?" she demanded, any pretense of concern for my health now completely gone. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The designer dress that hung from her slender frame had cost more than 3 months of my Social Security checks. The diamond earrings catching the light were an investment purchase I had helped finance. Everything about her screamed wealth that she hadn't earned. "They're not our accounts, Milani. They're my accounts." My voice was calm, steadier than I had expected. "I've simply taken back control of my own money." Clark stepped forward, his practiced charm sliding into place. "Harriet, there must be some misunderstanding. We've been managing your investments, helping you grow your retirement." "Stop." I held up my hand. "I heard you both, 3 days ago, right outside this door. I heard every word." The color drained from Milani's face. Clark's smile faltered, then disappeared completely. "You were talking about putting me in a nursing home," I continued. "About selling my house, which, by the way, I already had to sell. Because I gave you so much money that I couldn't afford a new roof. About how I'm draining your money, when in fact it's been the opposite for years. Mom, you misunderstood, Milani began. But I cut her off with a look that silenced her immediately. I understand perfectly now. I didn't before, but I do now. I reached for the glass of water on the nightstand, taking a small sip to ease my dry throat. For 30 years, I have put you first, Milani. I worked 3 jobs when your father left us. I skipped meals so you could have new clothes. I postponed my retirement to pay for your wedding. I gave you the down payment for this house. And we're grateful, we really are, Milani interjected, desperation creeping into her voice. Grateful people don't plot to put their mothers in nursing homes while she's recovering from heart surgery, I replied. Grateful people don't call their mother-in-law a drain on their finances when she's funded their entire lifestyle. Clark's facade cracked. Now wait just a minute. No, you wait, I said, surprising even myself with my firmness. For years I've waited. Waited for the loans to be repaid. Waited for some acknowledgement of my sacrifices. Waited to be treated with basic respect in this family. I'm done waiting. Milani sank into the chair beside my bed, her face a mixture of anger and fear. So what now? You're just cutting us off completely? I'm protecting what's left of my future, I corrected her. Something I should have done years ago. But we have bills, Mom. Mortgage payments, car payments. Get jobs, I said simply. Real ones, not the part-time consulting gigs you both dabble in between spending my money. Clark's face reddened. This is ridiculous. I have a legitimate investment firm. A firm that hasn't turned a profit in 5 years, I countered. During my sleepless night, I hadn't just frozen accounts. I'd gone through statements, tax documents, everything I could access online. The picture they painted was damning. A firm that's been kept afloat by continuous infusions of my retirement. Money! How dare you? Clark began, taking a step toward me. Be very careful about your next move, I warned him, my finger hovering over the nurse call button. I'm still recovering from major surgery in case you've forgotten. He stopped, his fists clenched at his sides. I want you both to leave now, I said. I need to rest. This is our house, Milani protested. A house paid for largely with my money, I reminded her. But don't worry, I won't be imposing on your hospitality much longer. I've made other arrangements. What? Arrangements? Milani asked, suspicion darkening her features. I smiled thinly. You'll find out soon enough. After they left, slamming the door behind them, I let out a long, shaky breath. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. My heart raced painfully, and I took one of the prescribed nitroglycerin tablets to ease the tightness in my chest. The truth was, I had indeed made arrangements, but they weren't quite complete. The day after overhearing their conversation, while they were both out, I had called my old friend Martha. She had been widowed around the same time I had been abandoned, and we had supported each other through those difficult early years as single mothers. Unlike me, Martha had remarried well and now lived in a spacious condo in a retirement community just outside the city. Of course you can stay with me while you figure things out, she had said without hesitation. The guest room is already made, up. I had also called Gerald Hoffman, an attorney I'd consulted years ago when considering bankruptcy after Robert left. I hadn't needed his services then, finding a way to manage on my own. But I had never forgotten his kindness during our consultation. Mrs. Peterson, I remember you, he had said warmly. What can I do for you now? I explained my situation, the years of financial support, the broken promises of repayment, the overheard conversation, and my decision to freeze the accounts. You've done the right thing, he assured me. But we need to make sure they can't access your funds through other means. When can you come to my office? I had an appointment scheduled for the following week, once I was cleared to travel short distances. Until then, I needed to remain in this house, under the same roof as the daughter who had betrayed me and the son-in-law who saw me as nothing more than a financial resource to be drained and discarded. That night, I heard them arguing in their bedroom upstairs. Their voices rose and fell like waves, occasionally clear enough for me to catch fragments. Your fault for not being more careful. Always said we were spending too much. Can't make the boat payment without. What about the credit cards? I felt no satisfaction in their distress, only a profound sadness. When had my bright, loving daughter transformed into this stranger who valued money and status above her own mother? Was it my fault for giving her too much? For not teaching her the value of what she received? Or was it simply the corrupting influence of Clark and his obsession with appearances? It didn't matter now. The damage was done on all sides. All I could do was protect what remained of my future and hope that someday, perhaps, Milani would understand the lessons that were coming her way. I reached for my phone and texted Martha. Can I come 3 days from now instead of next week? Her reply came almost immediately. Absolutely. I'll make up the room tomorrow. Hang in there, friend. For the first time since my surgery, I felt something close to peace. I had a plan. I had support, and most importantly, I had taken back control of my life from those who had abused my trust for far too long. The next morning would bring more confrontations, more accusations, more attempts to manipulate me back into submission. But I was ready. For them now. The days of Harriet Peterson being a silent ATM were over. Morning arrived with an unusual silence in the house. No coffee maker brewing, no shower running, no closet doors sliding open and closed upstairs. I checked my watch, 9:30 a.m. Normally, Milani would be at her part-time marketing consultation job and Clark would be at his office, making calls to potential investors while living off my money. I carefully swung my legs over the side of the bed, testing my strength. The incision on my chest pulled slightly, but the pain was manageable. Following doctor's orders, I had been taking short walks around the room each day, gradually increasing my activity. Today, I needed to venture further. Using the walker the hospital had provided, I made my way slowly to the door and opened it. The hallway was clear. I shuffled toward the kitchen, each step deliberate and measured. I found them both at the kitchen table, still in their pajamas, laptops open, faces drawn with stress. Empty coffee mugs and scattered papers covered the surface. They looked up when I entered, their expressions a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Mom," Milani said, quickly closing her laptop. "You should be resting." "I need to move around," I replied. "Doctor's orders." Clark didn't even attempt pleasantries. "We need to talk about the accounts, Harriet." I nodded, lowering myself carefully into an empty chair. "Yes, we do." "This is completely unreasonable," he began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We have obligations. Payments due. Do you have any idea what you've done to our credit rating?" "I imagine the same thing you plan to do to mine by putting me in a nursing home and selling my house," I replied evenly. Milani at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Mom, that was just talk. We were stressed about money. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed." "Exactly which part didn't you mean, Milani? That I'm draining your money? That I should be in a nursing home? Or was it the laugh you gave when your husband suggested getting rid of me?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair. No, what's not fair is taking advantage of your mother for decades, and then discarding her when she's no longer useful." I looked directly at Clark. "The marina called your cell phone earlier. I answered it since you were both still asleep. They wanted to know when you'll be making the payment on the boat slip. Apparently it's 2 months overdue." Clark's face flushed with anger. "You had no right to answer my phone. And you had no right to spend my retirement money on a boat you can't afford," I countered. "The call went to the landline, by the way. Your cell phone is probably disconnected by now. He stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. This is insane. You can't just cut us off without warning. Can't I? You were planning to put me in a nursing home without warning. At least I'm giving you the courtesy of a conversation. Milani reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. Mom, please, we can work this out. We're family. Family, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Family doesn't exploit each other, Milani. Family doesn't take and never give back. We've given back, she protested. We're taking care of you after your surgery, aren't we? I laughed, a short, harsh sound that hurt my chest. For 3 whole days, in a house I helped pay for, while plotting to move me to a nursing home. Should I be grateful? Clark interrupted, his business persona suddenly in place. Harriet, let's be practical here. You need your money managed. You're not getting any younger, and healthcare costs aren't getting any cheaper. We can work out a formal arrangement. Stop. I held up my hand. I've already made arrangements with a financial advisor recommended by my lawyer. My money will be quite well managed, thank you. You've talked to a lawyer? Milani's voice rose in panic. I have. Gerald Hoffman. Perhaps you remember him? He helped me review the paperwork when I gave you the down payment for this house. The down payment you promised to repay within 5 years. Clark's facade cracked again. This is how you repay our generosity? By bringing in lawyers? Generosity? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. You've been living off my money. For years. The cars, the vacations, this house. All subsidized by me. And now that I'm actually in need, now that I'm recovering from major surgery, you talk about dumping me in a facility. I pushed myself to my feet, leaning heavily on the walker. I'm leaving in 2 days. Martha Sullivan has offered me her guest room until I can find a place of my own. Mom, don't do this, Milani pleaded, tears forming in her eyes. We can work something out. There's nothing to work out, I said firmly. The accounts will remain. Frozen until my lawyer and financial advisor have reviewed everything. After that, what's mine will remain mine. What's legitimately yours, if anything, will be returned to you. Clark slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee mugs jump. This is extortion. No, Clark. This is consequences. I turned to leave, my legs already shaky from standing too long. Behind me, I heard Milani begin to sob, and Clark's angry muttering. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my room, exhaustion had overtaken me. I eased myself onto the bed, my heart racing uncomfortably. I took my medication and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. The confrontation had gone much as I expected. Clark's anger, Milani's manipulation, these were their weapons of choice. In the past, they had always worked on me. The thought of Milani upset or disappointed had been enough to make me give in, time and again. But not anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. Lawyer friend of mine specializes in elder financial abuse. Want his number? I texted back. Yes, please. The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence. Neither Milani nor Clark came to check on me. My dinner, a microwaved frozen meal, was left outside my door without a word. I ate half of it, too nauseous with stress to finish. That evening, I heard the doorbell ring. Curious, I moved to my door and opened it slightly, listening. I'm sorry, sir, but the payment didn't go through, a male voice said. I can't deliver the furniture without payment. There must be some mistake, Clark's voice was strained. Run it again. I've run it 3 times, sir. It's declined. Fine. Just take it back. We'll sort this out and reschedule. After the front door closed, Clark's footsteps stomped up the stairs, followed by the slam of a bedroom door. Later, I heard Milani on the phone, her voice hushed but desperate. Dad, I know it's been a while, but we're in a really tight spot. Mom froze all the accounts. No, she found out about. Yes, I know that was wrong, but Dad, please, we can't make the mortgage payment this month. Hello? Dad? The sound of her crying followed, soft but unmistakable. I felt a momentary pang of sympathy. Robert had never been there for Milani when she truly needed him. That hadn't changed, apparently. But my sympathy was tempered by the reality of what she and Clark had done, and what they had planned to do. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Gerald, my lawyer. Appointment confirmed for 11 a.m. tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 10:30. Don't sign anything before we meet. I replied with a simple thank you and settled back against the pillows. Tomorrow would be another difficult day, but for the first time in years, I was fighting for myself instead of sacrificing for others. It wasn't a comfortable feeling, not yet, but it was necessary. The old Harriet would have given in by now, unable to bear her daughter's tears. The new Harriet, the one born in the aftermath of betrayal, knew better. Sometimes love means standing firm, even when it hurts. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their own actions. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt oddly at peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it on my own terms. Gerald Hoffman arrived precisely at 10:30 the next morning. I was dressed and ready, sitting in the guest room with a small suitcase beside me. My heart medication was neatly organized in a pill container, and I had my important documents in a folder, the few I had managed to keep with me rather than in Milani and Clark's safekeeping. I heard the doorbell, followed by muffled voices in the foyer. A moment later, Milani appeared at my door, her expression tight. "There's a lawyer here for you," she said, her voice flat. "You're really doing this?" "Yes, I am," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. She shook her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "I don't even recognize you anymore." "That's funny," I said, reaching for my walker. "I was thinking the same thing about you." Gerald helped me into his sedan, treating me with a gentle deference that felt almost foreign after days of Clark and Milani's coldness. He was in his 70s now, his hair completely white, but his eyes were as sharp and kind as I remembered. "You're doing the right thing, Harriet," he assured me as we pulled away from the house. I didn't look back to see if Milani was watching. At his office, I was surprised to find not only Martha waiting for me, but also a financial advisor named Ms. Patel and another attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. "We thought it best to have everyone here at once," Gerald explained. "There's a lot to go through." And there was. For the next 3 hours, we combed through statements, transfers, loans, and investments. The picture that emerged was worse than I had imagined. Over the past 7 years, I had loaned Milani and Clark over $450,000, money I would never see again. They had also made risky investments with funds I had entrusted to them, losing nearly $200,000 more. "This is textbook financial exploitation," the elder abuse attorney, Mr. Delaney, said grimly. "We have a strong case for legal action if you want to pursue it." I hesitated, the thought of taking my own daughter to court making my stomach churn. What would that involve? A civil suit to recover the funds, potentially criminal charges for Clark since he was acting as your financial advisor without proper licensing, Mr. Delaney explained. "It would be public, potentially messy, but it might be the only way to recover some of what you've lost." I glanced at Martha, who squeezed my hand supportively. "You don't have to decide right now," she said. "Let's get you settled at my place first." Ms. Patel, the financial advisor, cleared her throat. "The good news, Harriet, is that you still have your Social Security, and there's about $120,000 left in accounts they couldn't access. It's not the retirement you planned for, but with careful management, you won't be destitute." I nodded, a mixture of relief and grief washing over me. Not destitute, but a far cry from the comfortable retirement I had worked decades to secure. Gerald drove me to Martha's condo afterward. As we pulled up to the building, my phone rang. Milani's number flashed on the screen. You should take it, Gerald advised. But remember, don't agree to anything without consulting us first, I answered, putting the phone on speaker so Gerald could hear. Hello, Milani. Mom, you need to come home right now. Her voice was trembling. This has gone far enough. I'm not coming back, Milani. I've made other arrangements. You can't just abandon your family, she cried, a note of hysteria creeping into her voice. Family? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my tone. Is that what you call people who plan to put you in a nursing home when you become inconvenient? That was just talk. We were stressed about money. You know how Clark gets when he's stressed. Yes, I do know. And I know how you enable him, make excuses, and then come to me to clean up the mess. Not anymore. There was a pause, then a different voice came on the line. Harriet, this is ridiculous. Clark's tone was conciliatory, the smooth, salesman voice he used on reluctant investors. We can work this out like adults. Come back and we'll discuss a fair arrangement. There's nothing to discuss, Clark. My lawyers and financial advisor have been through everything. They know exactly what you've done. Lawyers? His voice sharpened. You're threatening legal action against your own family? Do you have any idea how that will look? Are you actually worried about appearances right now? I asked incredulously. Think about Milani, he pressed. Think about how this will affect her career if word gets out that her mother is suing her. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of maternal guilt pressing down on me. Even now, he was trying to use my love for Milani as a weapon against me. Mom, please. Milani was back on the line, openly sobbing now. We're sorry. We'll make it up to you. Just come home. For a moment, I wavered. The instinct to comfort my child, to fix everything for her, was almost overwhelming. But then I remembered the cold laugh she had shared with Clark, the casual cruelty of their conversation outside my door. I am not coming home, I said firmly. The accounts will remain frozen until my legal team has completed their assessment. If they recommend legal action, I will take it. You can't be serious, Clark sputtered. Deadly serious. And Clark, if you ever talk about putting me in a nursing home again, make sure I'm not within earshot. I ended the call and let out a shaky breath. Well done, Gerald said quietly. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. Nothing about this was easy. But as Martha greeted me at her door with a warm hug and the promise of real homemade soup for dinner, I knew I had made the right choice. That evening, as Martha and I sat on her balcony watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with texts from Milani. The bank called. We can't make the mortgage payment. Please, Mom. Then, Clark is talking about bankruptcy. Is that what you want for us? And finally, Dad won't help. You're our only hope. If you ever loved me, you'll help now. Martha glanced at the messages over my shoulder and shook her head. She's still trying to manipulate you. She learned from the best, I said sadly, thinking of all the ways Clark had manipulated both of us over the years. I just never saw it until now. What are you going to do? Martha asked. I set the phone aside without responding to the texts. I'm going to let them figure it out on their own, just like I had to when their father left us. Maybe it's the only way Milani will ever truly grow up. That night, I slept more soundly than I had since my surgery. There were difficult decisions ahead, complex legal matters to navigate, and the heartache of a relationship with my daughter that might never be repaired. But for now, I was safe. I was among friends. And most importantly, I was finally putting myself first after a lifetime of putting everyone else ahead of me. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the young mother I had been, working 3 jobs and skipping meals to give Milani everything. That woman would be appalled at what was happening now. But she couldn't have imagined the years of exploitation, the casual cruelty of being called a burden by the child she had sacrificed everything for. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means letting go. And sometimes it means allowing those you love to face the consequences of their own choices, no matter how painful it might be to watch. 6 months can change everything. The seasons turned from winter to spring, and as the world outside Martha's condo blossomed with new life, I found myself experiencing my own rebirth. My recovery from heart surgery progressed steadily. The scar on my chest faded from angry red to a pale line, a permanent reminder of both physical and emotional healing. Weekly cardiac rehabilitation sessions strengthened my body, while weekly meetings with my financial and legal team strengthened my resolve. In the end, I didn't sue Milani and Clark. Mr. Delaney had built a compelling case for financial exploitation, but when the moment came to sign the paperwork, I couldn't do it. Not because I forgave them, I wasn't there yet, but because dragging this into the public eye would only bring more pain, more bitterness. Instead, we sent a formal demand letter through my attorneys, outlining the funds that had been misappropriated and offering terms for repayment. Their response came through their own, hastily hired lawyer. They couldn't pay. Clark's investment firm had collapsed without my funds to prop it up. They had missed 2 mortgage payments and were facing foreclosure. The luxury cars had been repossessed. They were, in the lawyer's carefully worded phrasing, experiencing significant financial hardship. They made their bed, Martha said when I showed her the letter. Now they're lying in it. She was right, of course, yet I couldn't help the twinge of maternal worry. Where would they go if they lost the house? What would become of them? Stop, Martha said firmly when I voiced these concerns. You've spent your entire life worrying about Milani. It's her turn to figure things out without you as a safety net. With Martha's encouragement, I focused on rebuilding my own life instead. Ms. Patel, my financial advisor, helped me create a realistic budget based on my remaining savings and Social Security. It wasn't the retirement I had planned, but it was sustainable. You're actually in better shape than many people your age, she told me during one of our meetings. The accounts you managed yourself were well maintained. It's just the ones you trusted to Milani and Clark that were decimated. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter who had called me financially irresponsible had been the architect of my financial ruin. By April, I was ready to find my own place. Martha had been a godsend, but I needed my independence back. I found a small 1-bedroom apartment in a senior living community. It wasn't fancy, no marble countertops or designer fixtures like Milani and Clark's house, but it was clean, safe, and within my budget. Most importantly, it was mine. On moving day, as Martha and I arranged my few belongings in the new space, my phone rang. Milani's number. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since the terse acknowledgement of our lawyer's letter. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Mom? Her voice sounded different, subdued, without the entitled edge I'd grown accustomed to. How are you? I'm well, I replied cautiously. Settling into my new apartment today. New apartment? You moved? Yes, it's a senior community on Westlake Avenue. Nothing fancy, but it suits me. There was a long pause. I'm glad you found a place, she finally said. Mom, I need to tell you something. I braced myself, half expecting another plea for money or help. I'm listening. Clark left. The words tumbled out in a rush. After the cars were repossessed and the foreclosure notice came, he just packed a bag and left. Said he couldn't handle the downgrade in lifestyle. He's filed for divorce. I sank onto my new sofa, absorbing this information. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so. I'd had reservations about Clark from the beginning. But the pain in Milani's voice stopped me. I'm sorry, I said instead, and I meant it. No matter what she had done, I never wanted her to experience The kind of abandonment I had faced when her father left. "Don't be," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "You were right about him all along, weren't you? You just never said it." "It wasn't my place," I replied. "You were an adult. You made your choice." Another silence stretched between us. "I'm staying with Julie from work for now," she finally said, referring to a colleague I'd met once or twice. "The bank is finalizing the foreclosure next month." And then, "I don't know," she admitted, her voice small. "I'm looking for a full-time job. My part-time marketing work isn't enough to afford an apartment in this area." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of maternal instinct urging me to offer help, to fix everything. But Martha's words echoed in my mind. "It's her turn to figure things out." "You'll find your way," I said instead. "You're resourceful. You always have been." "Not like you," she replied quietly. "I never had to be. You always made everything so easy for me." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of my sacrifices that I'd ever heard from her. Not quite an apology, but a recognition, at least. "Maybe too easy," I suggested gently. "Yeah, maybe." We talked a bit longer, an awkward but civil conversation. She didn't ask for money, didn't suggest moving in with me, didn't make any demands at all. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected, a small flicker of hope. 3 weeks later, she called again. She'd found a job as a marketing coordinator at a local hospital, a significant step down from her previous consulting work, but steady employment with benefits. She had also found a studio apartment she could afford, though it was small and in a less desirable area than she was used to. "Would you like to come see it when I move in next weekend?" she asked hesitantly. I agreed, and the following Saturday, Martha drove me to the address Milani had provided. It was indeed modest, a converted garage behind an older home with just enough space for a bed, a small kitchenette, and a tiny bathroom. Nothing like the spacious, elegant house she had shared with Clark. But what surprised me most was Milani herself. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect manicure. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a t-shirt as she unpacked her few remaining possessions. "It's not much," she said, watching my face anxiously. "But it's a start." "It's yours," I replied. "That counts for something." We had coffee at her small table, the conversation still careful but warmer than before. As I was preparing to leave, she reached into a box and pulled out a small, worn stuffed rabbit. "Remember this?" she asked, holding it up. I smiled. Recognition flooding through me. "Mr. Floppy. You wouldn't go anywhere without him when you were little." "I found him when I was packing," she said, turning the tattered rabbit in her hands. "It made me think about all the things you did for me back then. How you worked so hard to make sure I had everything I needed, even things like this silly rabbit when you could barely afford groceries." Her eyes met mine, filled with a new awareness. "I never really saw it before. How much you sacrificed. I just took and took, even as an adult. And then with Clark, I became someone I don't even recognize anymore." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a beginning. A recognition of truths long ignored. As Martha and I drove home, I felt lighter somehow. The anger and hurt hadn't disappeared completely. Those wounds were too deep for instant healing. But something had shifted. A door cracked open that had been firmly shut. "Do you think you'll ever trust her again?" Martha asked as we pulled into the parking lot of my new building. I considered the question carefully. "Trust is earned," I finally said. "She's making a start. We'll see where it goes." That evening, as I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset, I thought about the journey of the past 6 months. From the devastating betrayal I had overheard, to the difficult confrontations, to this fragile new beginning. Nothing had turned out as I'd expected in my later years. The comfortable retirement I'd worked for, the close relationship with my daughter, the security I'd sacrificed so much to build, all of it had been upended. Yet here I was, still standing, still healing, still finding my way forward. My phone chimed with a text from Milani. "Thank you for coming today. It meant a lot. Maybe dinner next week? My treat from my first paycheck." I smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't the relationship we once had, or the one I had always hoped for. But it was something real, something honest. And after decades of sacrifice and months of betrayal, that honesty felt like the most precious gift of all. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.